Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. I think it is official that America is a sovereign nation yet again. More and more people again are waking up to this, which is fantastic. Ample evidence, I think, that this is the case. I've laid it out here on the show as well. More people are making videos on X about this. More people are spreading the word. And again, they're finding a lot of the activities in Washington, D.C., of course, to be very interesting and wondering, of course, why it's all taking place. Some people are looking at it again from a superficial lens and saying, well, it's a bunch of pomp and circumstance, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. But again, if there's a contractual obligation that this is what has to happen, then America has to witness this, and Americans specifically have to congregate and witness this without there being some major announcement, then again, I think there's ample proof that that's the case. Even Marco Rubio kind of hinted at it earlier this week when he said, we've never seen this before in our lifetime, regarding, again, the events taking place around Washington, D.C. right now. And, of course, it's Donald Trump's birthday. And there's deals being made, of course, with Iran, which there's ample evidence that there was already a deal that was made a very long time ago, but this is all being scheduled out. Here's a quick post from Clandestine on X, and they said the following: a timeline is forming. Iran signs deal tomorrow. Trump hosts UFC fight on the White House lawn, fresh off the announcement of the end of the war. Trump leaves directly from UFC fight broadcast to sign final deal at G7. Then Trump signs deal Monday. When markets open, stock markets will surge, global energy markets will stabilize, and the price of oil will come down. And then the world will celebrate the beginning of a new era of peace in the Middle East while the World Cup is going on in the United States. Trump is in position to harness insanely good optics while essentially the entire world is watching, and he will carry this momentum into the midterms and beyond. You are watching a master strategist at work. It's too perfect to be an accident. And then, of course, he posts a picture of himself, which came from the White House's account that says Patriots in control. This was certainly planned out a long time ago. There is no doubt about it. And you can't do this without the military. Again, a lot of people say, well, Donald Trump did this on his own, and he's the one coordinating all of this in XYZ. That's impossible. It's not just one person. He's the figurehead, and he, of course, is the nation's leader, as it were, but this is all military. This has been military planning for a very long time. Again, ample evidence that that's the case. Plenty of Q posts describing all of this. Again, I've been through many of those as well. And this is all, again, all happening at the exact same time. It's a constant declass and a constant confirmation. It's not to say that there aren't still some bad things happening, of course, within our own country. There certainly are. But you have to stabilize what's been going on for centuries at the global level first. And then we can focus all of our attention on our nation, which I think, again, is certainly coming up. The other aspect of this, too, which I find interesting, is that there are a great deal of people, of course, not paying attention to this. And a lot of people would say, well, isn't that a bad thing? Isn't it terrible that all these people aren't paying attention to this when they should be? And the answer, of course, is yes. They should be paying attention to it, and you would think that people would want to think about the country that they live in and what's really been going on from a historical standpoint, and that they are living through history right now. At the same time, though, you don't need everybody to understand in order to accomplish it. Because eventually, people, again, will reap the benefits of it, you'd hope, and they will be able to eventually see, maybe, the bigger picture as to what's really been going on behind the scenes. And, of course, you can combine all of that with the declassification of the biolabs and the United States funding of these foreign and domestic biolabs that have been taking place, where, again, a lot of these injectable weapons have been manufactured. Again, we're getting closer and closer, I think, to the disclosure that vaccination in general is, in fact, biological weaponry. Always has been. But it's also something, again, that's been done in foreign countries to their own people, and then, of course, the constant trade of those vaccinations, biological weapons, in the form of an injection to prevent something, quote-unquote, that doesn't actually exist. This is leading directly to individuals figuring out where disease actually comes from. and how it actually spreads from person to person. And no, it's not coughing and sneezing on people. That's not what does it. A person, again, injects themselves with something that has been manufactured in a lab for the purposes of gain of function, which means, again, making the people around that injected person ill just by being around them through electromagnetism. Again, covered this on the show at great length over the years. You're well versed in it at this point if you've been listening this far. But people, again, are waking up to this, and again, it seems like the declassification of all of this information is leading in that direction as well, which is going to completely upend the medical system. That's my hope anyway. But let me get into some of this again regarding the biolabs, because as we know, it's always been twisted. Well, there were bioresearch labs, as Victoria Nuland very famously testified in a Senate hearing when being questioned by Marco Rubio. I played that video in the last war video, but again, she was just like, well, our fear is that Russia is going to invade and then they will seize those bioresearch facilities and then they will turn it into a weapon. That's not what was happening. Russia was destroying those bioweapons labs. They were going in, confiscating material, and then destroying the facility. Because that's what's been going on in Ukraine for a very long time, like China, Ukraine. That's why Donald Trump, back in 2020, and the years after, would always say it comes from China. He wasn't saying the country of China. He was saying China, Ukraine. Again, so many people are lost on this. It's astounding to me, but this is over on the Office of DNI's X account, and here's what they said again regarding a great deal of this. And this is certainly declass. I mean, this is a big, big deal. It says, here is the truth. Dangerous gain-of-function research was funded by the U.S. government around the world, directed and approved by people like Dr. Fauci. And then DNI Gabbard exposed that yesterday. Using U.S. government data, put together and uncovered by career subject matter experts in the intelligence community and other government agencies, yesterday's release highlighted one example of many overseas biolabs funded by the U.S., the research conducted there, and the significant risks they pose to the world, especially when located in a country at war. And then they have an entire link where you can find all of the files. The next slide says, Slide 1, a draft President's Daily Brief. Written after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, details threats to Ukraine labs due to dangerous pathogen storage. Biden officials confirmed this on the record. The biolabs in Ukraine and other countries held and may continue to hold hazardous pathogens. They were built, funded by the United States, and receive substantial funding that powerful people and interests want to keep flowing. Again, a lot of this was occurring under the Obama administration, and for the purposes of exactly what we thought was going to happen if Hillary Clinton, of course, had won the presidency. The good guys knew all of this. The good guys in government and in the military knew what the bad guys were planning. It was going to be far worse than the COVID lie. It was going to make the COVID lie look like a T-ball game compared to what they actually had planned for us. And you could see some of, again, the outskirt impact, I should say, and response in other foreign countries as to what they had planned, like the isolation centers and the hotels and locking people in rooms and not letting them leave, and take this fake test, which will test positive, even though you're not ill and you don't show any symptoms, and so on and so forth. The only reason it didn't have a much larger impact in the United States is because we have guns. People start knocking on your door and saying, you have to come with us and you have to take this test and you have to inject yourself with this. Well, people were going to get shot. That's what ultimately what was going to happen. People were going to defend their own lives, defend their own property. But again, that was the plan. Had Hillary Clinton have actually won, they would have shut down America and they would have killed anybody who dissented. But this is exactly what was going on again. And then, of course, as we know, they were going to manufacture a war and say, well, it came from Russia, that Russia did it. And then all hell breaks loose. Then they start bombing the shit out of Russia, and then, again, there's no end in sight there. It goes on here, it says Slide 2. A map created by ODNI using U.S. government data to show lab locations, biosafety levels at each location, and type of research being conducted, and if biological weapons were being stored. Slide 3, a list of labs and data pulled from the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine website that shows U.S. government funding, the contracting company used, and whether or not the lab had a permit for, quote, especially dangerous pathogens, unquote. Slide 4 says data compiled from open source information that was corroborated with U.S. government information, including U.S. Embassy in Ukraine data, showing connections to the defense industry and research project data on U.S.-funded highly pathogenic avian flu and other highly infectious viruses in biocontainment labs in Ukraine. Again, it's partially true. They're not highly infectious viruses. They're highly infectious injectables, injectable poisons that you would put into a person or a group of people and then send those people about their way on an airplane, close quarters, whatever it is. And then via electromagnetism, other people would end up getting ill. It says the existence, history, locations, and funding of these U.S.-funded biolabs was intentionally covered up by powerful people, falsely claiming that the labs do not exist and accusing anyone who says otherwise to be a foreign asset and traitors to America. Those lies are still being propagated today by the same powerful people and their allies who wish to see this dangerous research continue with little to no oversight. It says POTUS rightfully took action over a year ago to put a stop to U.S. funding of gain-of-function research to protect the American people and people all around the world. ODNI will continue to work closely with partners across the United States government to identify where these dangerous biolabs are located across the world, what pathogens they contain, and to end dangerous gain-of-function research, unquote. Again, all roads lead to Obama on this one. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, all of the people around those three, the people working in and around them on a constant basis, they were all aware. These people need to be rounded up. So back to my earlier point, it's not that everybody needs to know the truth about what's going on, because if you start making arrests, then people are going to find out. Why is so-and-so in jail? Then you can go back and answer that question by referencing what they actually did, which will become, again, completely undeniable. But unfortunately, and it's rather predictable, frankly, is that the mainstream news media isn't covering this, certainly not with the intensity that it needs to, because they were involved. They were involved in spreading these lies. They were involved in perpetuating the vaccination lie and stand on the sticker, wear the mask, the whole thing. The entire thing was fake. It's been proven now, time and time again. Even a layperson should be able to figure this out. But the mainstream media was involved. The ongoing problem, of course, too, is not only that the mainstream media isn't talking about this, but that Pfizer continues to exist, as do these companies, and they're continuing to be rewarded with more contracts to deliver COVID-19 shots, both to children, babies, and adults. And very quickly, again, this was from Nicholas Holscher on June 11th on Focal Points, thefocalpoints.com. It was titled, Breaking CDC Awards Pfizer $1.24 billion for Infant and Adult COVID-19 mRNA Injections. Subtitle was, Our public health agencies are doubling down after getting caught covering up 25 major safety signals, including sudden death. Apparently, again, these contracts were awarded on June 1st of this month and this year, and it's going to cover the fiscal years of 2026 and 2027 with $735.7 million for pediatric COVID-19 shots and $505.3 million for adult COVID-19 shots. Again, there are people, unfortunately, who have not figured this out, and that they need to not surround themselves, again, with any of these shots, let alone the people who are peddling them. But I think in the medical industry, certainly, there's a great deal of doctors who are openly saying that they fully understand that people don't want to take them anymore. That's not going to stop them from offering them or asking them if they've had them or do they want another or whatever else. But I think they're now more open to the idea of people saying that they don't want it simply because they've probably had endless patients openly tell them, hey, look, I took this and I've been sick ever since. Or I had a family member take this and now they're dead. Or a family member take this and now they have a permanent illness that they never had before taking them. That's going to scare the hell out of a lot of doctors. And I think that's working, and I think that's happening. So they're probably less likely to pressure their own patients in order to take these. But again, it goes way deeper than that. Again, we're talking about biological weapons specifically being made in bioresearch facilities. And again, it's not research in the sense that they're just playing around with these liquid illnesses that they intend to inject with people just because they think that something is floating around in the air that is going to make people sick. That's not it. It's weapons grade, weapons manufacturing that is taking place within these facilities. And again, many of them have been destroyed. They exist in our country too. It's quite possible that the ones in our country have also been destroyed to a great extent, but of course, we don't hear about it. We don't know what's really going on. We don't know, again, I'm certainly not making the mainstream media. It's not making the mainstream news, but then again, why would it? It would throw people, I think, into a little bit of panic. We're making biological weapons in America, within these biolabs here in America and within university campuses and medical facilities for the purposes of killing Americans. I mean, that's a lot to grasp, even for a layperson. So again, it's not like we're going to hear all of this as it actually gets shut down and as these particular facilities are destroyed. I mean, hell, on a global stage, we haven't been hearing about it much at all. But again, those of us who are looking into this and have been looking into this, we know that that's exactly what's going on because we can read between the lines. So again, it's good news. This is good that this is all coming out. This is good that this is being declassed for anybody to look at if they really want to. I fully understand, again, the basic name calling that's going to take place when someone, again, reports on this. Even Tulsi Gabbard is constantly being called a Russian agent and she's a propagandist and blah, blah, blah. She has nothing to lose. And when you have the truth on your side and you have nothing to lose, that's a very dangerous weapon in itself, which is a very, very good thing because the enemy has nowhere to go. So I want to round this out again just by bringing it back to American sovereignty very quickly. This was from Observing Consciousness over on X, and they raise a good point. And it has to do again with the refurbishing again of all of the monuments that are taking place in Washington, D.C., and how all of this is beyond symbolic. That again, American sovereignty is coming back to America. Maritime law has been eradicated in the old way, of course, that was controlling our military to a great extent, and certainly the funding for our military from the London bankers. But again, they basically said the following. They said, boom, arts of war is all signal. Regilded in gold between Lincoln and the Triumphal Arch, finished July 3rd, the eve of independence. Lincoln marks the Union preserved, the arch marks victory declared, gold marks restoration. Art of war becomes art of the deal. Pressure creates leverage, leverage becomes terms, terms become surrender, architecture. White hats are speaking through monuments again. War purified, republic restored, victory framed before July 4th. And then they posted again a truth post from Donald Trump showing sculptures being regilded in gold. And it says the following. It says, regilding of the massive arts of war sculptures located between the Lincoln Memorial and the site of the Triumphal Arch rapidly continues. The sculptures will be fully regilded by July 3rd. The photos below were taken yesterday. The Gilders studio has flown in gilders from around the country to perform this work. It's impressive. So again, I'm all for it. And again, from a symbolic standpoint and an imagery standpoint, I think it holds a great deal of meaning. And again, it's probably far more than what most Americans can even understand. But it had to be done this way. Again, I wasn't the designer of any of this. I certainly wasn't the designer of any military operation having to do anything with this. And again, most Americans weren't. But again, me personally, I would appreciate it if everybody was just told all at once. Just told the real history lesson of all of this all at once as to why this is all taking place. But the reason, that, again, that isn't happening is it would destroy the entire education quote-unquote system. Because again, if it did that, you basically find out that every single history teacher that you ever had is a quack. That every single history professor that exists at the college and university level doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. Because again, they haven't taken a dive and actually studied and immersed themselves into real American history and real world history, which is far more evil and far more sinister, again, even domestically, than what people can possibly imagine. I'll wrap up geopolitically with this one. This was from American Thinker, and I saw this article in a number of different places and articles like it, but it has to do with a previous executive order that Donald Trump signed having to do with mail-in ballot fraud, specifically the United States Postal Service. It was titled, "A Trump Executive Order Threatens Mail-in Ballot Fraud. America's Fate Hangs in the Balance of a Postal Scale." It says the following here: mail-in ballots are a recent Democrat Party innovation that substantially expanded opportunities for election fraud. This particular fraud opportunity works beautifully before and after Election Day. In the past, mail-in ballots were reserved for our military members serving overseas and for verified registered voters who, because of inability to vote in person due to absence or physical infirmity, had no other way to vote in an election. Ballots had to be requested and the voter's identity and registration verified before that privilege was granted. And ballots had to be received by Election Day or postmarked on Election Day. Time extensions were granted for the late overseas ballots of our troops. The recent primary elections in California reveal just how far Democrats have gone in abusing mail-in balloting. Put aside that anyone can register to vote, even on Election Day without ID. Just about any scrap of paper with someone's name on it will do. California mails out millions of unrequested ballots to everyone, including the dead and people who haven't lived in California for years. There's no signature verification, so anyone can vote with as many ballots as they can find. And California accepts written dates rather than actual postmarks. There are, of course, no other safeguards to ensure one man, one vote by eligible voters, which is why in blue states there are often many more votes cast than registered voters. Once Election Day votes are tallied, fraudsters know how many more Democrat votes they'll need to beat any Republican. It has been reported that one tranche of 24,000 late mail-in ballots in the recent California primaries had not a single vote for a Republican. And before Election Day, Republican ballots often disappear. In that case, it's not necessary to manufacture Democrat votes because uncounted Republican votes do the trick. It's a great scam, particularly when the U.S. Postal Service employees are involved, disappearing Republican ballots, losing military ballots, which overwhelmingly go for Republicans, and hoarding Democrat ballots to be produced at pivotal moments, as has been alleged in past elections. Mindful of these abuses, President Trump has issued an executive order that has CNN Surprise up in arms. State election officials could soon face a stark choice: hand over voter lists to the Trump administration or risk losing Postal Service delivery for mail-in ballots. Blue states, including California, regularly release these voter rolls to Democrat NGOs, nonprofits, and other Democrat-friendly organizations and individuals, but they're refusing to release them to the Trump administration. Keep the NGOs thing in mind, by the way. I'm going to get back to that a little bit later. It says that dilemma stems from newly proposed USPS rules that seek to comply with an executive order President Donald Trump signed this spring to crack down on mail-in voting. If courts let the order stand, it would give the federal government an unprecedented role in elections and could even put more voter data in the hands of Trump officials searching for supposed election fraud. 23 blue states and D.C. are suing. They're panicking over the midterms. Because unlike California, many haven't made election fraud quite so easy and hard to prove yet. The Trump administration cleared an initial legal hurdle last month when a federal judge in Washington, D.C., who is overseeing one set of the cases, declined to block Trump's executive order allowing the Postal Service to begin implementing it. That assumes the USPS won't obstruct implementation. Americans would like to believe all postal employees are nonpartisan, dedicated public servants focused only on their mission, but history reveals some are not. It says, quote, "If proper postage is paid on a mail piece, the USPS should deliver it." from former USPS Board of Governors Vice Chair Anton Hajar told CNN. The proposed rule says it's not regulating elections, but that's what, in effect, it's doing. And then the author here said, not quite. In a statement, the White House said that the entire Trump administration will continue lawfully enacting the agenda President Trump was elected to enact, which includes the safety and security of American elections. The administration remains confident that the executive order will be implemented by the November election, which was always the intent when it was signed, White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson said. The intent of the executive order is to require states to keep voter rolls updated, confirm that with the government, and to ensure that only people on legitimate voter rolls use the postal system for mail-in ballots, a primary source of election fraud. Blue states will certainly be able to find friendly federal judges to enjoin the executive order, and then the race will be on to find a constitutional appeals court to reinstate it in time to prevent midterm fraud. America's fate hangs in the balance of a postal code, unquote. The United States Postal Service was front and center on the 2020 election fraud. They were front and center, frankly, back in 2018 during the midterms. Everybody assumed that it was going to be a giant red wave. Remember all that? Here comes the red wave, and then, of course, it never happened because it was mail-in fraud. Voter fraud across the board. Same thing, of course, in 2020 very famously, and hell, probably since every election since then by and large. But when you have constant video of United States Postal Service workers doing these ballot drops in the dead of night from city to city to city, well, it's undeniable at that point. So bring in Space Force, track these people, write a few executive orders, certainly this one, implement it, and then watch what happens. It's going to take a huge chunk of this voter fraud out of the system, I think, which is a good thing. But again, that's assuming that these individuals are willing to follow the law, and as we know, many of them are not. Again, in the past, certainly in 2020, you have to assume that some United States Postal Service workers were arrested for, again, tampering with evidence, tampering with mail-in ballots, and a number of other things. I mean, I'm pretty sure that happened. We know that for a fact that a great deal of people have been arrested as a result of all of that, but who knows? Maybe they learned their lesson this time. Time will certainly tell on that one, though. Okay, education stuff, and there's a great deal here, and it's alarming. First of all, and there's a couple of different takes on this one, but this is from the Gateway Pundit, and it was titled, "White Kids Are Now Less Than Half of All Students Enrolled in American Schools, and Latino Numbers Are Surging." Again, there are a variety of reasons for this, and I'm going to get into some of these numbers here in just a second, but as I've said before, I think this is proving one of my long-standing points, which is that the more that people wake up, regardless of race, but certainly among whites, that the more that they wake up, the more likely they are to not attend these schools. That these schools are going to be left for, again, minorities, foreigners, the physically handicapped, and the mentally disabled. That it just isn't going to be left for individuals who can work at their own pace, again, almost regardless of race, but certainly individuals who can work at their own pace, fully understand and wake up to the fact that they can work at their own pace, and that it doesn't take 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in order to do it, let alone accomplish something. Now, before I get into some of these numbers, let me make mention of this, because this, too, is sort of a connected problem, and it really is a huge problem. The dependency that parents have on government and schools to educate their children is alarming. It's always been something that bothers me when, again, parents just forfeit their children to government and say, well, I may be the parent and I may have raised this person from the age of birth all the way through age 4 or 3, but now all of a sudden I have no idea what to do. I'm completely inept when it comes to teaching my child now, so now I have to hand it over to government because you're far more qualified than I am. These parents are brain dead if they actually believe that, and unfortunately, endless parents do. In the Westerville City Schools board meeting here, approximately last week, It was absolutely embarrassing, some of the comments that were being made, and it was funny because it was coming from leftist parents. And they're again complaining and lecturing a leftist, all-female school board. Again, a levy got passed this past November for that school district. And a couple of parents came up to the lectern and they started basically, again, letting the board have it. And they said, well, we were under the impression that when you passed this levy, and I fought to pass this levy, this permanent income tax levy, which is completely asinine why anybody would vote for such a thing, but they did. They were again upset with the board because they were saying, we voted for the levy so that we would have smaller class sizes, so that my child wouldn't be in a class with so many students that they wouldn't receive the attention that they actually need. One of the parents even got up there and started yelling about how one of the classes is filled with mostly boys, and what a problem it is. And this, of course, was a mother. This was a woman, a leftist woman, that all boys are the problem, and that we need more teachers because we need to separate these boys because there are too many disruptions, and we need to teach these boys about basically how to be brainwashed little kids and sit in their chairs all day long and XYZ. Again, these environments are not for the human mind. Certainly not youth. They aren't. This has been written about time and time again, decade after decade after decade, that the school environment actually is built to destroy the innate abilities of both boys and girls, to ruin it, to siphon and suck the creativity straight out of them, and all of the things that they're naturally born with, to just then beat them into something that they are not. It's sad. And it's even more sad when you have parents themselves advocating for that kind of indoctrination of their own children. So much so that they even take an opposite approach where they have serious concerns with students who are achieving above their grade level. And they think that this is a problem. Now, I've been over it on the show before, that there are endless students, again, who are in talented and gifted classes, and I mean these are the individuals, again, who are sort of the overachievers, as it were. And in a lot of these talented and gifted classes, you end up having higher coursework, so to speak, like a more frequent coursework, we'll say. It's not that it's different information. It's just that they're being asked to do more in a shorter amount of time. And of course, that can have serious mental and emotional impacts on these people, because these are the kids who cry the second that they get a B, because they've had nothing but A's. I mean, those people are nuts. But when you have parents and a school board basically saying, okay, are we checking on all these kids? Are we making sure that they're where they need to be, and that we're not overloading them, and that we're not doing this and we're not doing that? What you end up doing is unfortunately, you end up taking individuals who happen to achieve at a higher level and you beat them down to the point where they're acting on more of a so-called average level. But at the same time, the goal is to advocate for students who are unfortunately labeled below average, like special education, quote unquote, and try to get them up to more of a higher level of thinking and a higher level of so-called achieving. Whatever the hell that means these days is anybody's guess. But even so, that's really that's the goal there. Unfortunately, for many of these parents, it's not. For many parents of so-called special education children, they love keeping them under that banner, and they don't want them to leave. In fact, if they don't do well, or they struggle with even one thing, those parents will then double down on their labeling of their own kid and say, well, they have serious anxiety and they have serious issues and learning disabilities, and we need to have more evaluations of them and blah, blah, blah. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the parent is the problem, because the parent is relying on a problematic system. The system is broken. The system is corrupt. The system is fraudulent. It's designed to pigeonhole these kids into a particular area and keep them there. But if one of them again, begins to actually achieve, so to speak, again, depending on a person's definition of achievement, and they actually start to abandon those labels, whatever those labels are and whatever they mean, and they start to escape it, the system will try to keep them right where they are, and so will the parent. And that's a huge problem. This is another reason why, again, people should abandon the entire education system, certainly from the government standpoint, because all of these games only get played by the government system. It doesn't happen within the walls of your own home when you have silence, immersion, real study, and the ability to look up real information at any time you want. They also had a presentation in the same board meeting about how they don't use any other AI system except for Google Gemini. That Gemini is the only AI system that anybody in the district is allowed to use. Do you understand the problem with that too? I mean, you can't even counterbalance an AI system with another AI system. They won't even let you use their own technological devices within the district, and he openly said this. This is the tech guy for the whole district. He openly said, if a student or a teacher attempts to get on another AI system, our technology will lock them out. They won't be able to use it. That's not learning. That's not innovation. That's not exploration. That's not study. That's not immersion. And that's not freedom. And it doesn't sound like America either. You're controlling information distribution and access to information, which means you're controlling the mind. Well, that's what the word government means. And this is, again, what the schooling system is. And they openly say it again, that they're contractually obligated to make that the case because they sign a Google contract. That don't worry, Google's going to protect everybody's information and all your students' information and everything else. But we have to use their systems and only their systems, so much so that our own systems will lock out any student or staff member who seeks to find another system or ask another question. It's absurd. This is why whites are leaving. Whites are leaving because they're waking up to this. They're not the only ones either, but it's predominantly them. It says the following here: white students now make up less than half of all kids enrolled in American schools from pre-K through graduate programs, according to new Census Bureau data. The shift represents a significant demographic change in the nation's education system. Yes, there are a lot of reasons for it. Side note: depopulation, invasion, low birth rate, the whole thing, and a high birth rate among minorities. But whites are leaving because they're finding different places to educate themselves. It says, according to a report from Axios, as of October of 2024, white, non-Hispanic, non-multiracial students account for 48.8% of total enrollment across public, private, and homeschool settings. This marks a decline from 46.7 million white students in 2000 to 36.6 million in 2024. Latino enrollment has grown sharply over the same period. In 2000, there were 10.2 million Latino students, and by 2024, that number has risen to 18.4 million, making Latinos the second largest group at 24.4% of total students. The demographic change is most visible in early childhood and K12 education. White non-Hispanic children make up around 47% of students in nurseries and kindergartens, and 48% in elementary and high schools. In higher education, white students still hold a slim majority at 51.1%, though this is expected to continue declining as more diverse K12 students move through the system. The report did not state how many of the rising Latino population are illegal migrants, unquote. I bet it didn't, because they don't want to tell you, because they're trying to hide them. Again, a K-12 school's budget is based on enrollment, and if that enrollment includes illegal aliens as opposed to white students, then they need more illegal aliens. They need as many human bodies in seats as humanly possible to cover their costs. That's it. Now, here's another reason why people are leaving, and they should leave. And like I've always advocated for, they should leave en masse. In Cardington, Ohio, and this was a story, again, that was sent to me by a former guest on the show and a listener of the program. They, and again, formerly in the education business themselves. But they sent me this story, and again, it was a graduation speech that was interrupted by the school's principal, the high school principal, and it was a valedictorian that was giving the speech. And I'm going to let this particular post speak for itself, and then I'm going to read the kid's speech in its entirety, because again, there were parts of it that were redacted, because ultimately the school didn't want the kid to give the speech the way that he had originally written it. And again, censorship. This is a problem. If you're going to have speeches, then let people say what they want to say, or just don't have speeches. It's one or the other. But again, in this interruption, the school principal himself actually puts his hands on the student and pushes him away from the lectern. You can't do that. You can't put your hands on a student. Again, that's assault. That's a lawsuit. So there should be massive lawsuits with this, and the parents should sue the school district immediately, but we'll see if that happens or not. Either way, give this description of this event a listen here in 3, 2, 1.
Imagine that your son is graduating as the valedictorian at his local high school, and he's making his speech and then just gets shoved off by the administrator because the administrator doesn't like what he's saying. That is exactly what happened to this high school graduate this last weekend at Cardington Lincoln Public High School in Cardington, Ohio. His mother did give me permission to make this video, and I just wanted to share with you what she wrote to me when I asked her about this situation. She said that her child had not been in trouble not one time at the school, that he has earned 2 associate's degrees while in high school, and he was told that he needed to have a speech by Thursday morning and was told on Wednesday. So he made a speech, and then they redacted all of these red parts. They made him redact all of those red parts, which I will include at the end of this so you can read it in full. I don't see any problem with it. You can tell me in the comments. But then, once Brandon got up on stage and read his speech, at the end, he said, apparently, freedom of speech doesn't apply to Cardington valedictorian speeches. The principal was sitting there reading the speech, which you'll see at the end of this video. I'm going to include the clip. Goes up, shoves him, and then they take his diploma out of his passport. Later, the Cardington superintendent was then heard saying if he can't behave, he doesn't belong in Cardington. They later said that Brandon could only receive his diploma back if he apologized to the school. So the school shoves him, the school waters down his whole speech, gives him a crazy deadline, and then embarrasses him in front of everybody, but Brandon, an 18-year-old kid, is supposed to apologize to the school district. Make it make sense. Brandon then felt it was his only option to just go ahead and apologize so he could at least have his high school diploma, in which then the school told him that he was a disappointment. That's cute. So there is a school board meeting tonight on, June 8th at 6 o'clock. And I implore anybody local, which many of you sent this to me and wanted me to cover it, to show up and let your voices be heard that children should not be treated this way. Before any of you trolls come in the comments saying that he's not a kid, these kids are literally weeks, if not a few months into adulthood. Yes, they are still kids. And this one handled his situation beautifully. I'm now going to include text of his speech. The red parts are what the school wanted him to redact, and then I am going to show a video of where he gets shoved. Do what you will with this information.
Okay, so when the principal comes up, he pushes him with his left hand across his own body, and then he uses his right shoulder and his right elbow and pushes the kid out of the way. You can't do that. You just can't. So here's the kid's speech, and I'll again also highlight and read the portions that apparently the school wanted redacted, which apparently the kid did redact. The very first sentence is redacted, and it says, "I apologize in advance. I was told the requirements of this speech about 24 hours before it was due to be approved." And then this portion wasn't redacted. It says, quote, "Like all graduation speeches, I would like to start by thanking the people in my life who made me who I am today and helped me get to this point. First and foremost, my mom, for always being there for me no matter where or when. She will drop whatever she is doing just to help me. I would also like to thank my 2 brothers and 3 sisters for supporting me, growing alongside me, and teaching me lessons that I will carry for the rest of my life. Finally, I would like to thank my teachers, coaches, friends, and peers who have helped create my high school experience. It goes on, it says, many graduation speeches are filled with jokes and stories meant to make people laugh. There is nothing wrong with that, but today, and then this is redacted, I don't want to be funny. I don't want to give a speech that everyone forgets by tomorrow. And then this portion isn't redacted. I want to leave you with something real. As we have been getting closer and closer to this day, I have been hearing the phrase over and over now, quote, cherish high school because these are the best days of your life, unquote. Oh, this is going to be good. Then this portion is redacted. It says, the truth is that not everyone in this room had a positive high school experience. Some of us felt supported, encouraged, and valued. Others spent years feeling overlooked, unheard, or like we were expected to fit into a box that was never made for us. Speaking for myself, there were times when I felt more discouraged than supported. There were moments when it seemed easier for people to tell me what I couldn't do than to help me discover what I could. Despite that, and then this portion is not redacted, I agree that we should appreciate all the moments and fun that we had. I don't agree that these have to be the best days of our life, of your life. Sorry. It goes on. It says most of us just turning 18 or 19. Most of us are just turning 18 or 19. We have an entire world ahead of us. We have opportunities to learn more, travel, explore, meet new people, and discover who we truly are. This sentence is redacted then. We have the rest of our lives to settle down, start a family, and build careers. So what's the rush? Again, they redacted that. This is not an education environment. This is a control environment. This portion is not redacted. It says, why should the best days of our lives already be behind us when we still have so much life ahead, waiting for us to make the most of it? There is no question about it that, this is redacted, the times we are living in are uncertain and intimidating. This portion is not redacted. The future can feel scary. It says the days ahead will be challenging at times, and then this portion is redacted. Politics are dividing our nation, environmental changes are overwhelming, and people continue to suffer due to discrimination based on race, identity, or who they choose to love. Then this portion is not redacted. At times, the whole world may feel like it is working against us. I think one sentence got cut off, but it goes on. It says, there will always be people who think your path is wrong simply because it's not the prescribed path or the path they choose. I challenge you to listen to their advice, but don't let others live your life for you. At the end of the day, you are the one who has to wake up and live with your decisions. If the path you choose brings you happiness and fulfillment, that is the right path. Don't be afraid to take a road that others don't understand. Some of the best journeys begin when you stop worrying about what others think and focus on what you want. A quote from, dare I say, the greatest song of all time by one of the greatest bands, quote, yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. No matter where life takes you, there is always an opportunity to grow, adapt, and choose a new direction. My message is simple. Live a little. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be in a rush for the next big thing. Stop and look around a little. The memories you make, the people you meet, the moments you truly feel alive are what will make up your best days. It feels like yesterday that we were walking through these halls for the first time. Now we are sitting here, gowns and caps on, graduating. Then this portion is redacted. Despite hardships, despite the world seeming to fall apart around us, we are here. We made it. Not because every door was open for us, but because we kept moving forward when some doors stayed closed. That was redacted. This portion is not. We succeeded because of our determination. The people who truly believed in us and our refusals to let others decide our worth. Pause and take in the moment, but don't look back. Then this sentence is redacted and it wraps up. Don't let your future be filled with regrets and nostalgia for these days that are past. Find joy today. That was redacted. My God. And then it doesn't, the rest of it isn't redacted here. These last two sentences, or three sentences, I should say, make joy in the future through taking chances, exploring, learning, and growing. Congratulations, classmates. I wish you abundant happiness and the best days ahead, unquote. Again, good speech. Why would you redact that? Simple. You're an asshole. It's that simple. These individuals are 100% fine working in this environment and censoring students. Now here's the follow-up video to this, and it had to do with, again, apparently the school board meeting that took place after the fact. And here's the audio from that, again, from the exact same Instagram account.
This is your update for the Cardington Lincoln Valedictorian. Last night was the board meeting and it was a packed house. The room was full, which is not the norm. School board came in and immediately walked back out for executive session. Funny thing is that they said the executive session was to talk about the superintendent and his renewal of a 5-year contract, but they took the speaker list and allowed the superintendent to sit in on the conversation about his own job, which I don't know if that's normal, but that doesn't sound right to me. After making everybody wait for them to be in executive session for exactly 54 minutes, they finally came back in and allowed the public to start speaking, and Brandon's mother spoke along with, I believe it was 9 other people. 9 out of the 10 speakers were speaking on the culture that was happening in Cardington. This situation was just the tip of the iceberg. What they were speaking about in these meetings as public participants giving their statements was mostly to the culture that was happening in Cardington. This was just one little example of what is happening. What I was hearing from all of the speakers was even a basketball program that's under investigation for misconduct, special needs kids not getting what they are needed. There were just like mental health issues. The fact that nearly 50% of their senior class actually went to go do other learning things like at a career center, CCP, which is College Credit Plus, or they went to an alternative school called the Tomorrow Center. And although they still graduated at Cardington, they went and did other educational services other places because they did not want to be at Cardington. So many people showed up and pleaded that this superintendent not have a renewal of his contract, that they find a new superintendent that could bring in a new, healthier culture to Cardington. There were so many, even previous students, a doctor that donates a lot of her time to the students, just so many different people were begging and pleading for this superintendent not to stay. And the board almost unanimously voted him in. It was only one board member who decided to vote no. Everybody else voted yes, so this guy gets to stay. There's so many issues that were brought up last night at Cardington, and I know that Cardington is not unique. This is happening in a lot of school districts. The staff could not even spell Cardington, their own town name, right on the passports for the diplomas, that the diplomas go in. That is concerning. So everybody's asking, what happens now? The school's not going to issue an apology. They don't think they did anything wrong. Actually, they are banking on hoping that everybody forgets that this happened. They are hoping that nobody remembers this come next election, which is in whenever, more than a year, because they just had a levy that failed, and they clearly don't care that it failed. They're just going to keep on doing what they're doing. But taxpayers, parents, they need to show up to the board meetings. They need to keep being loud. They need to keep getting the news attention. They need to keep saying what the problems are. So although this is happening in Cardington, and I'm talking specifically to Cardington taxpayers, I am also talking to anybody anywhere with a school district that is just as corrupt as this one. Vote accordingly. Be smart with your vote. Vet those board members, because clearly it is important here, so these things don't happen.
First of all, they care that their levy failed. That bothers them greatly. I'm certain they wouldn't put forth a levy if they didn't want it. And a levy failing pisses off every school district. So good. I mean, that's a good thing that their levy failed. The second thing is just unenroll your children. It's not complicated. Again, we're talking about a high school. We're talking about an entire school district. Just unenroll your children and watch what happens. Again, the state will have to intervene. People will have to be removed. That's what takes place. When you don't have butts in the seats, the state will take over. But they won't do that because, again, parents are brainwashed. Well, I have to send my kid here, and what else am I going to do? And I work, and I can't stay home with my kid all day long, and I can't teach them. I'm just a parent. I mean, the lines for rationalization are endless. But the fact is that you had censorship, and then you had a principal put his hands on a student, push him out of the way, and then shoulder him out of the way. That's a lawsuit, without a doubt. File a police report. You have it on video. He wasn't super rough with the kid or anything, but even so, you can't push a kid out of the way. Not on stage, not certainly on camera like that, and during a graduation is highly unprofessional. That principal should be fired immediately. Again, the superintendent for not firing the principal, well, it's a criminal organization. That's why they don't do it. They always have each other's backs. Because again, the superintendent probably made that hire of that principal, which means, again, to cut him loose looks bad on the superintendent, so the superintendent would actually believe. And that's too bad. Sometimes people do terrible things after you hire them thinking they're going to do good things, and then they don't. Well, cut them loose. But they don't. Again, it's their HR policy to circle the wagons. That's the way that they operate. Because again, that's how criminal organizations operate. I've said it before, I'll say it one last time, certainly in this regard. If it were a restaurant and not a school, and the service was bad and the food sucked, you would never go back to that restaurant ever again. But for some reason, people think that a school is different. It isn't. If the place gives you food poisoning, don't go back. If the place assaults your child, don't go back. If the place insults your child, don't go back. If they censor your child, don't go back. If they disrespect you in a board meeting, don't go back. This is not hard. Because in any other context, you would do that very thing. You would just not go. Let me give you another example as to the lengths to which K12 school districts will go to keep information from the public. And then, of course, cover it up and attempt to cover it up on the back end. This has to do with Missouri, and it was from stlpr.org/education. And this was from June 10th. And it was titled, Missouri Auditor Says Francis Howell Officials Failed to Properly Vet Former Superintendent. This kind of thing happens all of the time, where again a person is hired, as was the case certainly in the school district where I live regarding a sexual predator. But this happens consistently, and then of course they do a vetting process after they hire the person and after they've signed a contract, and then they end up paying out the individual anyway. But in this particular case, they apparently also had the entire school board signed a non-disclosure agreement discussing what they found out about this person, and again, why they paid out the individual a portion of their contract. It says a new report from the Missouri State Auditor's Office says that Francis Howell School District leadership failed to properly vet its former superintendent before offering him a 3-year contract last year. Mike Dominguez was hired by the Francis Howell Board of Education in March of 2025, but was placed on leave in the summer before ever working with the district. Francis Howell paid him about $230,000 in severance when the school board terminated his contract. The board installed longtime district administrator Mark Delaney as its superintendent in response. Quote, the enormous amount of money paid out to a man who never worked a day for the district certainly raised a lot of questions for the taxpayers and numerous red flags for my office. State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick said in a statement, quote, given what our investigation has uncovered, I firmly believe the district could have and should have identified the concerns that led to its separation from Dr. Dominguez prior to hiring him in the first place, unquote. It says Jennifer Joles, a spokesperson for the district, said in a statement that the findings in the auditor's report did not outline any violations of Missouri law, board policy, or contract regarding the previous superintendent, unquote. The school board has made changes to the way it handles superintendent contracts, according to Joles, but she did not specify what the changes were. We have strong leadership in place and are focused on the future, she said, of course. It goes on, it says, Fitzpatrick's report states that the recruiting firm the district used to find and hire Dominguez didn't conduct a thorough application review. The report found several typographical errors and noted the application did not include references or letters of recommendation from his previous employer, Garden City School District in Kansas. Now, side note, I've mentioned this before, time and time again, that when a superintendent, or even a principal, but more specifically a superintendent, attempts to move from one place to the next, there are superintendent associations that will take the name of these superintendents, or a superintendent, but a great deal of them. They put them in a giant pool, and then they work on behalf of the superintendent to try to find the superintendent a job. Yes, you're passing the trash, but it's a firm basically drafting you out to a school district and saying, well, this is the greatest person since sliced bread, and you'll want this superintendent, or here's 3 that we believe as a firm are the best that could fit within your school district, and then you get to decide, of course, as a school district and interview them accordingly. It's disgusting, but it is exactly what happens. And certainly in this particular case, there were pieces missing within this person's application, apparently. It says the recruiting firm also failed to flag social media posts that relayed concerns about Dominguez's tenure with his former school district to the school board. It says once the board learned of concerns about Dominguez's ability to lead the district, it acted swiftly to place him on administrative leave and eventually terminate his contract to prevent disruptions to school operations, according to the report. Again, school districts don't do proper internet searches of the people that they hire. And it's basically because, again, they're fat, lazy, and stupid, and they just outsource it. They simply say again and rationalize their participation and say, well, they did an FBI background check and a criminal background check, and they weren't a criminal, and the FBI didn't flag them, so we had no reason to not hire them. But they don't use a Google search. They don't do a Google search. They don't poke around, again, on social media platforms and type in the person's name in the search bar. They don't do these things because they're lazy. And finally, of course, a quotation from the board itself, certainly, again, the school district's attorney, is that they circle the wagons and then they claim that they didn't do anything wrong, when clearly they did. They said, quote, the board believes it engaged in due diligence in compliance with the law and board policy, particularly when it relied upon the services of a professional search firm. We disagree with the auditor's conclusions as we believe that the conclusion is speculative, states a letter sent by the school district's attorney to Fitzpatrick. Yeah. What are they going to do? Admit fault? They're a school district. They never admit fault. Never. They could literally set the building on fire on camera with their own matches that they purchased and did it collectively, and they would say, well, clearly an accident occurred. It was an unforeseen circumstance, and it was not our intent, but it ended up occurring this way, and we seek to remedy this situation and make sure that it never happens again, and we would support any suggestions in the future as to how we could do this better, and blah, 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 blah. This, again, is why they have spokespeople. This is why they have directors of communication for school districts, because they're paid liars. That's it. They're paid to be stupid, and they are arguably some of the dumbest people that exist within school districts by and large. They're just dumb. They cover for the school district all of the time. And the district, again, certainly board members, superintendent, etc., regardless of the school district across the nation, they do the exact same thing too. At the end of the day, children and parents are last. They're always put last. The organization is put first. It's never going to change. It'll never be anything different. And when you catch a school district engaging in illegality of some kind, again, it has to be either police reports, background checks, open records requests, lawsuits, you name it. That's the approach that you have to take, because if you think for a minute that you can engage in direct communication, have them admit wrongdoing, rectify the situation in some way, and then never make the mistake again, you're dreaming. That's just not how they operate, because that's not how criminal organizations operate. Now, I'll end with this. Speaking of criminal organizations, and this ties back to the very beginning of what I mentioned at the very top of the show here. I came across this website and it's called asylum.ngo. And it has to do with immigration non-governmental organizations. And it says the following at the very top of this website, which I highly recommend checking out because it has a daily ticker of the amount of money that our governments give these NGOs that ultimately, of course, cause all of this asylum-seeking invasion that is, of course, taking place that, as we know, has a direct impact on public schools and everything else, crime, all of it, the economy. It says an open, searchable catalog of the organizations across the United States, Europe, Australia, and Canada that help refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants in one way or another. Government funding to immigration NGOs, and it shows a cumulative number here. As I'm speaking to you right now, the number continues to toll up, and it is $51 billion plus dollars, $51.79 billion across 5 countries. The United States takes the lead with approximately $19.2 billion. Canada is next with a real annual number of $16.4 billion. Australia is an estimated number of $11.0 billion. The United Kingdom is $5 billion, and Ireland is $70 million. It then says towards the bottom, no financials published. Excluded from the total are France, Norway, Sweden, Italy, Netherlands, and European Union bodies. Again, you can click on the database and then you can select the country and it shows you, again, the list of these organizations and their location. Get a load of these and some of these names. These are just from the United States alone. The first one listed is called 100 Black Men of St. Mary Incorporated. I think that's in Paterson, New Jersey. The next one is 123 Citizenship, Immigration, and Services Incorporated out of Orlando. The next one is One Race Rooting Action to Cultivate Equality Incorporated in Salem. And the next one is 28 Love Corporation out of Tallahassee. The next one is 2L Foundation in Naples. The next one is 318 Partners Mission Foundation. And it just goes on and on and on. 9/11 Steps to America is another one. A New Day Foundation out of Kansas City. A Silver Lining Solutions Incorporated is another one. A2Z Life Foundation Incorporated in New York. It's a massive list. It's probably 25 organizations. They have to be shut down. This is the problem. And I'm telling you, when you select the country too, if you pick Australia, get a load of some of these names. Afghan Fajar Association Incorporated and Charity. There's Afghan Global Diaspora Ltd. There's Afghan Women on the Move Incorporated. Afghan Women's Support Association Incorporated, African Australian Network Alliance Limited, African Sub-Sahara International Development Agency. Again, they're telling you who they're invading your country with and where they're coming from. They're openly saying it. It's in the name of the NGO. All of these have to be shut down. And if they're not shut down, continue the invasion then, because that's just what's going to happen. Again, the school system will continue to crumble. The economy will continue to pay the price for it. Again, more bought-off politicians will allow all of this invasion to continue to take place, and then you won't have a country anymore. And that, unfortunately, is the goal for many horrible, horrible people who, again, hold on to political positions, not just in America, but in countries all around the world. The NGOs have got to go. There's too many of them. And they have one goal in mind, to destroy the country from within and root out, again, a native-born people who have lived in that country and made it what it is. Time will tell if they get shut down, but of course the elimination of USAID was a big move in that direction, but again, when you plug that hole and the money's not leaving, those NGOs are just going to find another way to get more money. And they're going to circle the wagons and consolidate around one another in order to, again, continue to accomplish what they want to accomplish. But They're evil entities. And again, you would think that they could be brought up on criminal charges of treason, sedition, and again, allowing for the invasion of a country. But when it's backed by government and politicians, they'll never call it illegal. They'll call it humanitarian aid. That's their terminology, among others, but that's how they operate. So we'll keep an eye on it as usual. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, have a great week, and I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.